All right. Hello, Visaka. Hello, Rick. How's audio, video, etc.? Hello? Hello? Hello, Daydreams? Okay, thank you. Hello, Visaka and Isla. We'll give it another minute or two and then we'll get started. Hello, Jantha. All right. We'll get started with the intro chant. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Savatyang tatra ko varanchavo bhikkhave desasami bharaharancha bharadanancha bharanikke panancha tang sunatta Katamo cha bhikkhave bharo panchupadana kanda tissa vachaniyang katame pancha rupupadana kando Vedanupaganda kando Sanyupadana kando Sankarupadana kando Vinyanupadana kando Ayang vuchati bhikkhave bharo Katamocha bhikkhave bharaharo Puggalo tissa vachaniyang yavyayang ayasma Evang namo evang goto ayang uchati bhikkhave bharaharo Katamancha bhikkhave bharadanang Yayang thana pono bhavika nandiraga sathagate tatra tatra binandani Sayatidang kamatanha bhavatanha vibhavatanha idang vuchati bhikkhave bharadanang Katamancha bhikkhave bharanikke panang yotassa yeva tanhaya asesa viraga nirodho chaggo patinissaggo muttiyanaliyo idang vuchati bhikkhave bharanikke pannananti Idang avocha bhagava idang vatvana sugato atta parang etadavocha satta bharahave panchakanda bharaharo cha puggalo bharadanang dukang loke bharanikke panang sukang Nikkipitva garung barung anyang barang anadiya samulang tamhama buye nitchatto parinibbutoti. English. At Savatthi, there the Blessed One said this, Bhikkhus, I will teach you the burden, the carrier of the burden, the taking up of the burden, and the laying down of the burden. Listen to that. And what bhikkhus is the burden? It should be said, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging. What 5? The form aggregate subject to clinging. The feeling aggregate subject to clinging. The perception aggregate subject to clinging. The volitional formations aggregate subject to clinging. The consciousness aggregate subject to clinging. This is called the burden. And what bhikkhus is the carrier of the burden? It should be said, the person, this venerable one of such a name and clan. This is called the carrier of the burden. And what bhikkhus is the taking up of the burden? It is this craving that leads to renewed existence, accompanied by delight and lust, seeking delight here and there. That is, craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, craving for extermination. This is called the taking up of the burden. And what bhikkhus is the laying down of the burden? It is the remainderless fading away and cessation of that same craving, the giving up and relinquishing of it, freedom from it, non-reliance on it. This is called the laying down of the burden. This is what the Blessed One said. Having said this, the Fortunate One, the teacher, further said this. The 5 aggregates are truly burdens. The burden carrier is the person. Taking up the burden is suffering in the world. Laying down the burden is blissful. Having laid down the heavy burden, without taking up another burden, having drawn out craving with its root, one is freed from hunger, fully quenched. All right, friends, it is Monday night. That means it's time for another Dhammapalooza, the festival of Dhamma with the Maggasekha community, where we do a variety of Dhamma-related activities. We just did some chanting. Maybe later we'll do some meditation. In between, who knows? Maybe we'll do lots of questions. Maybe there'll be no questions when we read suttas. It is up to you who are attending this stream live to have a say in what we are going to do for today. So for the next couple of minutes in the chat, if you have any questions, you can put them in there. If you have any topics you'd like me to talk about, you can put them in there. And if nobody has any suggestions, well, we can read a sutta. I've had a specific sutta lined up for a couple weeks now. We've just not got up to it, and that's fine. There's no rush. Looks like it's a quiet night, which is fine. This weekend has been quite exhausting. Lots of people, lots of Dhamma teaching. Hello, Jay. Welcome. All right. Why don't we read the sutta? Bhaddāli Sutta. So I have heard. At one time, this is Majjhima Nikaya, Middle Length Discourses, number 65. At one time, the Buddha was staying near Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. There, the Buddha addressed the mendicants. Mendicants, Venerable Sir, they replied. The Buddha said this: Mendicants, I eat my food in one sitting per day. And we have here a little note by Bhante Sujato. The practice of eating one meal a day is encouraged but not required by the Vinaya. The Buddha reminisced about the days when he merely needed to mention it to the monks, mention it, and the monks would follow suit. In the related story, the Buddha encouraged not eating at night, to which monks also objected, occasioning the laying down of the Vinaya rule. Although at least some of the monks later came to regret their objections, recognizing that the Buddha had acted for their welfare. So, mendicants, I eat my food in one sitting per day. Doing so, I find that I'm healthy and well and nimble, strong, and living comfortably. You too should eat your food in one sitting per day. Doing so, you'll find that you're healthy and well, nimble and strong, and living comfortably. When he said this, Venerable Bhaddāli said to the Buddha, Sir, I'm not going to try to eat my food in one sitting per day, for when eating once a day, I might feel remorse and regret. Well then, Bhaddāli, eat one part of the meal in the place where you're invited and bring the rest back to eat. Eating this way, too, you will sustain yourself. So this would be the place where you're invited. So, even at the time of the Buddha, people invited monks to come to their house to eat. So it's like having some food and then taking leftovers back. Of course, for a monk, you still have to eat it within the allotted time. You can't hold on to it till later in the afternoon. But this is a middle ground that the Buddha is saying, well, why don't you try this? Sir, I'm not going to try to eat that way either, for when eating that way, I might also feel remorse and regret. Then, as this rule was being laid down by the Buddha and the Sangha was undertaking it, Bhaddāli announced he would not try to keep it. We have an obstinate monk. Then for the whole of that 3 months, Bhaddāli would not see the Buddha face to face, as happens when somebody doesn't fulfill the training according to the teacher's instruction. So we have here the commentary talks about you can never really fully trust the commentary 100% because some of the what they say is a little weird. But so when eating once a day, I might feel remorse and regret. So this is udacha kukucha, right? This is the mind having worries. It could be worries of, oh, I can't eat until the next day. It could be worries of, is what I'm getting nutritious enough? As somebody who eats one meal a day, that is something I worry about. If I'm in a place where it's very heavy carbs or the nutrition's not that great, that is something I think about, especially if it's long term. That does bring up some restlessness and remorse. So I suggest it's probably related, all kinds of food related issues, related to only eating once per day. Or maybe even that they might think, oh, well, when I was a lay person, I used to be able to eat whenever I wanted, and now I can't. Right? There's lots of things that might bring up restlessness and remorse, regret, and remorse when it comes to eating as a monk. And at that time, several mendicants were making a robe for the Buddha, thinking that when his robe was finished and the 3 months of the rainy season, rain's residence had passed, the Buddha would set out wandering. Then Bhaddāli went up to and this is for those of you who are familiar with the rainy season, right? This is a little glimpse, the Vasa, into actually why there's such a thing as giving robes at the end, right? They wanted to have the Buddha have a fresh robe for when he goes out wandering, right? Because when you're wandering, you're liable to get some tears and wear and tear on your robe. Then Bhaddāli went up to those mendicants and exchanged greetings with them. When the greetings and polite conversation were over, he sat down to one side. The mendicant said to Bhaddāli, Reverend Bhaddāli, the robe is being made for the Buddha. When it's finished and the 3 months rain seasons have passed, the Buddha will set out wandering. Come, Bhaddāli, learn your lesson. Don't make it hard for yourself later on. Yes, reverends, Bhaddāli replied. He went to the Buddha, bowed, sat down to one side, and said to him, I have made a mistake, sir. I was foolish, stupid. Hello, Robert. Hello, Wasabi. Robert, I can talk about that question after the sutta. It's a good question. I have made a mistake, sir. It was foolish, stupid, and unskillful of me that, as this rule was being laid down by the Buddha and the Sangha was undertaking it, I announced I would not try to keep it. Please, sir, accept my mistake for what it is, so I will restrain myself in the future. And so, do we have the... Okay, it's a little bit more than that. I was just checking to see if this is where we have the threefold ways of dealing with mistakes that you make. Maybe it is part of this. We'll see. Indeed, Bhaddāli, you made a mistake. It was foolish, stupid, and unskillful for you that as this rule was being laid down, the Buddha and the Sangha was undertaking it, you announced you would not try to keep it. And you didn't realize this situation. The Buddha is staying at Savatthi, and he'll know me as the mendicant named Bhaddāli, who doesn't fulfill the training according to the teacher's instructions, and you didn't realize this situation. Several monks have commenced the rains retreat at Savatthi. Several nuns have commenced the rains retreat at Savatthi. Several laymen reside in Savatthi. Several lay women reside at Savatthi, and they'll know me as the mendicant named Bhaddāli, who doesn't fulfill the training according to the teacher's instructions. Several ascetics and Brahmins who follow various other religions have commenced the rains retreat in Savatthi. So this is another important thing for in terms of the rains. The rains retreat was not originally a Buddhist thing. This was something that was commonly done by various samana groups at the time of the Buddha. And the Buddhist monks were kind of looked down upon by the society for not doing it. So the Buddha made it a rule that the monks would do it. As the mendicant named Bhaddāli, one of the senior disciples of Gautama, who doesn't fulfill the training according to the teacher's instructions. That's important, actually. That's a good one. Tara. This is somebody who's been a Buddhist monk for at least 10 years. This is a senior monastic. So this also gives you the idea of the general evolution of the food rules when it comes to the Buddha. Because in the very beginning, monks could eat 3 meals a day. And it kind of went through a bunch of iterations. Who also didn't realize this situation. I made a mistake, sir. I was foolish, stupid, and unskillful of me. That, as this rule was being laid down by the Buddha, and the Sangha was undertaking it, I announced I would not try to keep it. Please, sir, accept my mistake for what it is, so I will restrain myself in the future. Indeed, Bhaddāli, you made a mistake. It was foolish, stupid, unskillful of you to do that, as this rule was being laid down by the Buddha and the Sangha was undertaking it. You announced you would not try to keep it. What do you think, Bhaddāli? Suppose I were to say this to a mendicant who is freed in both ways. Please, mendicant, be a bridge for me to cross over the mud. Would they cross over themselves or struggle to get out of it or just say no? No, sir. What do you think, Bhaddāli? Suppose I was to say the same thing to a mendicant who is freed by wisdom, or a direct witness, or attained to view, or freed by faith, or a follower of the teachings, or a follower by faith. Please, mendicant, be a bridge for me to cross over the mud. Would they cross over themselves or struggle to get out of it, or just say no? No, sir. What do you think, Bhaddāli? At the time, were you freed both ways, freed by wisdom, a direct witness, attained to view, freed by faith, a follower of the teachings, or a follower by faith? No, sir. Weren't you void, hollow, and mistaken? Yes, sir. I made a mistake, sir. Please, sir, accept my mistake for what it is, so I will restrain myself in the future. Indeed. Okay, here we go. Now we have so the Buddha kind of rubbed it in a little bit, make him squirm a little bit. Oh, didn't you say this? Didn't this? And now we come to the, indeed, Bhaddāli, you made a mistake. But since you have recognized your mistake for what it is and have dealt with it properly, I accept it. For it is growth in the training of the Noble One to recognize mistake for what it is, deal with it properly, and commit to restraint in the future. Bhaddāli, take a mendicant who doesn't fulfill the training according to the teacher's instructions. They think, why don't I frequent a secluded lodging, a wilderness, the root of a tree, a hill, a ravine, a mountain, cave, a charnel ground, a forest, the open air, a heap of straw? Hopefully I'll realize a superhuman distinction in knowledge and wisdom worthy of the noble ones. So they frequent a secluded lodging. While they're living withdrawn, they're reprimanded by the teacher, by sensible spiritual companions after examination, by deities, and by themselves. Being reprimanded in this way, they don't realize any superhuman distinction in knowledge and wisdom, vision worthy of the noble ones. Why is that? Because that's how it is when someone doesn't fulfill the training according to the teacher's instructions. But taking a mendicant who does fulfill the training according to the teacher's instructions, they think, why don't I frequent a secluded lodging, a wilderness, root of a tree, a hill, a ravine, a mountain cave, a charnel ground, a forest, an open air, a heap of straw? Hopefully I'll realize the superhuman distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones. They frequent a secluded lodging, a wilderness, the root of a tree, a hill, a ravine, a mountain cave, a charnel ground, a forest, the open air, a heap of straw. While they're living withdrawn, they're not reprimanded by the teacher, by sensible spiritual companions after examination, by deities, or by themselves. Not being reprimanded in this way, they realize a superhuman distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones. So these two examples, the first one and the second one, they're both secluded, physically secluded. Both looks like they're going to set the groundwork for deep states of samadhi. However, because of obstinance, because of a lack of sila, in the first situation, they do not get these deeper states. In the second situation, even though the external conditions are similar, in the second conditions, they do. And so they, not being reprimanded, they realize the superhuman distinction in knowledge and vision worthy of the noble ones. And now we go into the first jhana. Quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unskillful qualities, they enter and remain in the first jhana, which has rapture and bliss born of seclusion, while placing the mind and keeping it connected. So this is a very important thing to understand. Things like getting into jhana, right jhana, not all kinds of like miccha jhana or miccha, like all kinds of different mental states, but true jhana, you don't get into if you're immoral and obstinate and causing trouble. You just cannot get into these deep states. The mind won't let you. The mind has restlessness and remorse. Why is that? Because that's what happens when someone fulfills the training according to the teacher's instructions. Furthermore, as placing the mind and keeping it connected are stilled, a mendicant enters or remains in the second jhana, which has the rapture and bliss born of immersion, with internal clarity and mind at one, without placing the mind and keeping it connected. Why is that? Because that's what happens when someone fulfills the training according to the teacher's instructions. Furthermore, with the fading away of rapture, a mendicant enters and remains in the third jhana, where they meditate with equanimity, mindful and aware, personally experiencing the bliss of which the noble ones declare. Equanimous and mindful, one meditates in bliss. Why is that? Because that's what happens when someone fulfills the training according to the teacher's instruction. Furthermore, giving up pleasure and pain and ending former happiness and sadness, a mendicant enters and remains in the fourth jhana, without pleasure or pain, with pure equanimity and mindfulness. Why is that? Because that's what happens when someone fulfills the training according to the teacher's instructions. When their mind has become immersed in samadhi like this, purified, bright, flawless, rid of corruption, pliable, workable, steady, and imperturbable, they extend it towards the recollection of past lives. They recollect many kinds of past lives. That is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, 1,000, 100,000 rebirths. Many eons of the world contracting, many eons of the world expanding, many eons of the world contracting and expanding. They recollect many kinds of past lives with features and details. Why is that? Because that's what happens when someone fulfills the training according to the teacher's instructions. When their mind becomes immersed in samadhi like this, purified, bright, flawless, rid of corruption, pliable, workable, steady, and imperturbable, they extend it towards a knowledge of the death and rebirth of sentient beings. With clairvoyance that is purified and superhuman, they see sentient beings passing away and being reborn. Inferior and superior, beautiful and ugly, in a good place or a bad place. They understand how sentient beings are reborn according to their deeds. These dear beings did a bad thing by way of body, speech, and mind. They're reborn in the underworld, hell. These dear beings, however, did good things by way of body, speech, and mind. They're reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm. And so, with clairvoyance that is purified and superhuman, they understand how sentient beings are reborn according to their deeds. Why is that? Because that's what happens when someone fulfills the training according to the teacher's instructions. When their mind has become immersed in samadhi like this, purified, bright, flawless, rid of corruptions, pliable, workable, steady, and imperturbable, they extend it towards the knowledge of the ending of all defilements. They truly understand this is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. And this is the practice that leads to the cessation of suffering. They truly understand these are the defilements. This is the origin of the defilements. This is the cessation of defilements. This is the practice that leads to the cessation of defilements. Knowing and seeing like this, their mind is freed from the defilements of sensuality, desire to be reborn in ignorance. When they're freed, they know they're freed. They understand rebirth has ended. The spiritual journey has been completed. What had to be done has been done. There is no return to any state of existence. Why is that? Because that's what happens when someone fulfills the training according to the teacher's instructions. When he said this, Venerable Bhaddāli said to the Buddha, "What is the cause, sir? What is the reason why they punish some monk, repeatedly pressuring him? And what is the cause? What is the reason why they don't similarly punish another monk, repeatedly pressuring him?" Hello, Gregory. Welcome. Take a monk who is a frequent offender with many offenses. When admonished by monks, he dodges the issue, distracting the discussion with irrelevant points. He displays annoyance, hate, and bitterness. He doesn't proceed properly. He doesn't fall in line. He doesn't proceed to get past it. And he doesn't say, "I'll do what pleases the Sangha." In such a case, the monks say, "Reverends, this monk is a frequent offender with many offenses." When admonished, he dodges the issue, distracting the discussion with irrelevant points. He displays annoyance, hate, and bitterness. He doesn't proceed properly. He doesn't fall in line. He doesn't proceed to get past it. And he doesn't say, "I'll do what pleases the Sangha." It would be good for the Venerable to examine this monk in such a way that this disciplinary issue is not quickly settled. And that's what they'll do. Take some other monk who is a frequent offender with many offenses. When admonished by the monks, he doesn't dodge the issue, distracting the discussion with irrelevant points. He doesn't display annoyance, hate, and bitterness. He proceeds properly. He falls in line. He proceeds to get past it, and he says, "I'll do what pleases the Sangha." In such a case, the monks say, "Reverends, this monk is a frequent offender with many offenses." When admonished by the monks, he doesn't dodge the issue, distracting the discussion with irrelevant points. He doesn't display annoyance, hate, and bitterness. He proceeds properly. He falls in line. He proceeds to get past it, and he says, "I'll do what pleases the Sangha." It'd be good for the Venerables to examine this monk in such a way that the disciplinary issue is quickly settled, and that's what they'll do. So we have the difference between how offenders are treated is related to their honesty, their sincerity, their acknowledgement of their mistakes, their willingness to at least try not to do it again. Right? This is That mindset is a big difference from the other one, where the monks say, let's draw this out a little bit longer. Take some other monk who is an occasional offender without many offenses. When admonished by the monks, he dodges the issue. In such a case, the monks say, Reverends, this monk is an occasional offender without many offenses. When admonished, he dodges the issue. It would be good for the venerables to examine this monk in such a way that this disciplinary issue is not quickly settled. And so you have a monk who's an occasional offender, but still, because of how they react and how there's no humility, sincerity. Well, we're going to make sure that this lasts. Take some other monk who is an occasional offender without many offenses. When admonished by the monks, he doesn't dodge the issue, etc. In this case, they say he's an occasional offender. He doesn't dodge the issue. It would be good for the venerables to examine this monk in such a way that this disciplinary issue is quickly settled. And that's what they do. And if you are humble and sincere and recognize that you've broken these rules, well, then there doesn't need to be a lot of extra time devoted to this, right? Like they have to break you down if otherwise, right? If you're being obstinate, if you're not acknowledging, then it takes a while to get you to do that. Take some other monk who gets by with mere faith and love. And so usually Bhante Sujato translates metta as love, but here this is really the word for love, pema. So saddha and pema, loving affection. This is not metta, two very different things. In such a case, the monk says, Reverends, this monk gets by with mere faith and love. Suppose we punish him, repeatedly pressuring him. No, let him not lose what little faith and love he has. Suppose there was a person with one eye. Their friends and colleagues, relatives and kins would protect that one eye. Let them not lose the one eye that they have. In the same way, some monk gets by with mere faith and love. In such a case, the monk says, Reverends, this monk gets by with mere faith and love. Suppose we punish him, repeatedly pressuring him. No, let him not lose what little faith and love he has. This is the cause, this is the reason why they punish some monks and repeatedly pressuring him. And this is the cause and the reason why they don't similarly punish another monk, repeatedly pressuring him. This is now we're getting into Maggasekha territory. With Maggasekha complaining about the degradation of the Sangha, even within the lifetime of the Buddha. All right. Hello, Soma and John and Audrey. And what is the cause? What is the reason why these days there are more training rules and fewer enlightened mendicants? Because remember, the Buddha didn't just come out with a bunch of training rules. The training rules were developed as the need arose. As a monk broke a rule that caused a lot of problems, a rule was made. That's how it is, Bhaddāli. When sentient beings are in decline and the true teaching is disappearing, there are more training rules and fewer enlightened mendicants. The teacher does not lay down training rules for disciples as long as the certain defiling influences have not appeared in the Sangha. But when such defiling influences appear in the Sangha, the teacher lays down training rules for disciples to protect against them. So this is for the disciples to be protected against the defiling influences. and they don't appear until the Sangha has attained a great size. An abundance of material support and fame, learning, and seniority. So in the early days, when most of the early monks are already probably like a Sotipanna, and things are tougher, there's not as much support, there's not as much fame and all this stuff, it's actually better practice. Ajahn Chah complains very similarly, talking about his monastery from the early days compared to after, you know, he got famous and all of these other issues. But when the Sangha has attained these things, then such defiling influences appear in the Sangha. And the teacher lays down training rules for disciples to protect against them. There were only a few of you there at the time when I taught the exposition on the simile of the thoroughbred colt. Do you remember that, Bhaddāli? No, sir. What do you believe the reason for that is? Sir, it's surely because for a long time now I haven't fulfilled the training according to the teacher's instructions. That's not the only reason, Bhaddāli. Rather, for a long time I have comprehended your mind and known. While I'm teaching, this silly man doesn't pay attention, apply the mind, concentrate wholeheartedly, or actively listen. Still, Bhaddāli, shall I teach the exposition of the simile of the thoroughbred colt? Or I shall. Listen and apply your mind well and speak. Yes, sir, Bhaddāli said. The Buddha said this. Suppose a deft horse trainer were to obtain a fine thoroughbred. First of all, he'd make it get used to wearing the bit. Because it has not done this before, it still resorts to some twists, ducks, and dodges. But with regular and gradual practice, its bad behavior is extinguished. When it has done this, the horse trainer next makes it get used to wearing the harness. Because it has not done this before, it still resorts to some twists, ducks, and dodges. But with regular and gradual practice, its bad behavior is extinguished. When it has done this, the horse trainer next makes it get used to walking in procession, circling, prancing, galloping, charging, the protocols and traditions of the court, and in the very best speed, fleetness, and friendliness. Because it has not done this before, it still resorts to some twists and ducks and dodges. But with the regular and gradual practice, its bad behavior is extinguished. When it has done this, the horse trainer next rewards it with grooming and a rub down. A fine royal thoroughbred with these 10 factors is worthy of a king, fit to service a king, and reckoned to be as a factor of kingship. In the same way, a mendicant with 10 qualities is worthy of offerings, dedicated to the gods, worthy of hospitality, worthy of religious donations, worthy of veneration and with joy and palms, and is the supreme field of merit for the world. What 10? It's when a mendicant has an adept's right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right immersion, right knowledge, and right freedom. So this is when the eightfold path becomes the supramundane tenfold path. A mendicant with these 10 qualities is worthy of offerings dedicated to the gods, worthy of hospitality, worthy of a religious donation, worthy of veneration with joined palms, and is the supreme field of merit for the world. That is what the Buddha said. Satisfied, Venerable Bhaddāli was happy with what the Buddha said. Hello, Douse. Hello, Steve. All right, so we have done this wonderful sutta that covers a couple different good aspects to cover. Now we can go to Robert's question, and if anybody else has any questions too. Question: if you start Q&A Ajahn Sumedho talks about the fetter, usually translated as rites and rituals, as having to get over cultural conditioning. Thoughts on that interpretation? No, no. That's not what Sila Bhatta Paramasa is. Sila Bhatta Paramasa, you know, no, I can't even connect it. Sila Bhatta Paramasa is the view, and you see this if you read the suttas, you see that there are many people doing many different rites and rituals, thinking that that alone will bring them to awakening, like bathing 3 times a day in the Ganges, like being a dog duty ascetic, etc. So Sila Bhatta Paramasa has to do with this view that by doing some kind of rites and rituals, that alone will bring you to awakening. This is not how that works. The Buddha says in many places in the suttas, explaining how that's not how that works. Right? The way that it works is you purify the mind. You don't wash in the Ganges 3 times a day. You purify the mind. Right? So that is what Sila Bhatta Paramasa is. It's getting rid of the idea, the fetter, that thinking that if you do all these rites and rituals, that will bring you to awakening in and of itself, which it doesn't. Now, of course, everybody does rites and rituals as part of their culture, as part of whatever they do, right? Buddhists bow. Maybe they do the incense and the flowers and all that. That's all rites and rituals. If you have the idea that bowing 1,000 times and making sure there's fresh flowers on the altar is going to bring you to awakening, then you're wrong. Then that's like Sila Bhatta Paramasa. Cultural conditioning sounds very, I mean, don't get me wrong, part of the practice goes against cultural conditioning. So no matter what culture you're from, you're going against cultural conditioning. But I would not put that under Sila Bhatta Paramasa. At least not from the perspective of the suttas. Ajahn Sumedho has never really struck me as a sutta guy. He's that Ajahn Chah's pretty pretty close to the suttas, but most of his disciples are not, and they might use them here and there, but yeah, the not like to the level of like a Bhante Sujato and an Ajahn Brahmali, which is kind of where I'm at. So yeah, I would be interested to see what Bhante Sujato or Ajahn Brahmali says about that. I suspect it would be something similar to what I said. Hello, Steve. Perennial Daydream says, are the paramis of energy and resolve the same as right effort? The paramis are not in the early Buddhist texts, and so I really don't know deeply about them. So I can't say if they're the same. I would say at least to some level, virya. I don't know what the Pali word for resolve would be. I don't know that English translation. But at some level, yes, virya is without a doubt. I mean, it's one of the factors of awakening. It's the third factor of awakening. So yeah, and it is definitely part of right effort. But in terms of like the paramis, I'm sure mostly probably what I said is probably accurate, but there might be other things that I'm not familiar with. So it sounds like the Buddha would disagree with the Pure Land tradition yet. The Buddha of the early texts would, for sure. So when I talk about the Buddha, especially from the sutta perspective, I say the Buddha of the early texts. That's because the Buddha of the early texts, the Buddha of later Theravada, the Buddha of Mahayana say things that contradict each other. You know, they can be quite different in how they say things. So this is why I think it's very important to clarify. Because if everybody just says, the Buddha says this, and then somebody's like new to Buddhism and they're like, wait a second, how can the Buddha say this and this at the same time? No, because it's different traditions, different perspectives. Yeah, Pure Land is probably the Pure Land, and some levels of Tibetan, some types of Tibetan Buddhism are probably the furthest from the Buddhism you see in the suttas, for sure. And it's also, like, in many ways, the furthest time-wise as well. So it's just kind of the way things naturally progress with religion and ideas and philosophies and thoughts over time and distance. They adapt and they change and they merge, and that's what they do. This is a good question. Are there any materials in the suttas not considered EBT? So, oh, Jay, it's Aditana. Okay, Aditana. That's right. That's right. I don't think I'm used to hearing Aditana as resolve. Yeah, that's probably why. And Aditana is also not something you see a lot in the early texts. That's not really a very common word. Um, so it's very common in Thai forest. That's where I've heard the most from it, is the Thai tradition using that word. Um, but all right. Is there any material in the sutras not considered DBT? Yes. So there are certain suttas that, when doing cross-textual analysis between the Pali and the Sanskrit, um, you kind of see that maybe this was changed or added and things like that. But for the most part, within the four Nikayas, the long discourses, the middle discourses, the long discourses, the middle discourses, the connected discourses, the numbered discourses, for the most part, the overwhelming majority of all of those pages, 4,000 some odd pages, maybe more, is early Buddhist text, is early. Now, early doesn't mean, early can be like within 100 years, so it's not like, it's not exactly like, so you can't really say like this is the exact words of the Buddha recorded. It's as close as we're ever going to get, for sure, but they're definitely early, and they're very internally consistent, meaning that across thousands of pages, there's really no contradictions. There's really no like very wildly disparate understandings of a certain topic. There's lots of the same consistent repetition in terms of the teachings. So, when you get into the fifth Nikaya, that's the Kudaka Nikaya, and that's where you see things like the Dhammapada. Dhammapada is considered early Buddhist text. Sutta Nipata is considered early Buddhist text. And when you read the Sutta Nipata, that's even way more archaic than like most of the Nikayas. You can tell that's really old. Sutta Nipata was actually the first suttas I ever read. It was the first sutta book that I ever bought. I bought it off Amazon back in, what was, like 2007, something like that. And And so also the Udana, the Itivutika, the Tarigata, and the Taragata, the suttas that have the voices of the elder bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, right? Those parts of the Khuddaka Nikaya are considered early Buddhist texts, and the rest is not. Let's see. I've seen Bhikkhu Bodhi dispute the timing of that one sutta that the Buddha says that letting women in will mean the Dharma will only last 500 years. Letting women ordain, it might have been Thanissaro. It was one of them. Somebody. Perhaps. Perhaps not. One of the things you do have to be very wary of when you're dealing with early Buddhist texts is the desire to explain away something that you don't agree with and you don't like, that doesn't match your modern views, as, oh no, that was just added later. You have to be very careful of that, so that we because I have seen some people kind of do that. Like, it's kind of like you see like their wishes for it to not be something the Buddha said, or it to be something later, maybe added by those evil Brahmins. That can overcome your kind of rationality to be like, well, let's really kind of study this and really see. Let's not just jump to hasty conclusions. Rick says, can you speak to how to apply this sutta in terms of dealing with coarse versus fine training rules? Can you clarify that a bit more? What do you mean by coarse versus fine? Give maybe some examples. Soma Drums, this is the exact thing that I use when people try to make the Buddha out to be some kind of like social justice crusader, right? And that there is people who try to do that from the suttas. And this is exactly what I say. He never said freed your slaves. He said treat them well, right? The Buddha is quite clearly not trying to change society. He quite clearly understands what he's there for. Yeah. Perennial says, for what it's worth, the only contradictions I usually see are between the Nikayas and the Abhidhamma. Yeah, yeah. Now, what I will say is, over my, now going on 17 years of reading suttas, I have come across what I thought initially were contradictions. However, after getting different perspectives and then later developing more insight into the perspective from my own practice, I then see, oh no, this was not a contradiction. This was a lack of understanding on my part. Yeah, this is a very important thing to remember about the cultural context. So whatever culture a Buddha is born into, the Buddha has to conform his society, his fourfold sangha, his rules, and everything that he's building, so that the Dhamma can last as long as possible to help the most amount of people. And so, no matter what Buddha is arising, no matter what time, no matter where, the culture of the time will dominate how he teaches, rules that he makes, etc. If you look at the monks' rules, a good 97% or so of them are directly related to the culture of the time. Now, some of those, obviously, it's time, some of those things are timeless, so they also work for the culture of these days. Many of them don't. If a Buddha came at this time, his rules and it would be in relation to, well, whatever country he was in. If it was in the West, it would be one way. If it was in other places, it would be a different way. The whole idea is to set forth the wheel of Dhamma in motion in a way that the society will want to keep it alive so it can transmit to other places and grow. If the Buddha did not think that way, Buddhism sure as heck would not be here in the West 2,600 years later. It probably would have died out way sooner. Yeah, Jay, I vaguely remember somebody using right resolve as well. I don't like that. That's, I mean, it's kind of like a synonym of intention, but yeah, you can just say right intention. I think it makes it more clear. Rick says, course training rules might be not killing, being celibate, um, not disrupting meditation periods, etc. Fine might be how to bow to senior monastics, how to eat, clean their bowls, etc. Well, I mean, in relation to this sutta, if you break a rule, you break a rule. Like, and you should acknowledge that and confess that. Doesn't matter if it's a fine or a coarse rule. The idea is that you want to confess it so that it's out in the open, so that you don't, if you're hiding a rule breach, it's very, there's lots of restlessness and remorse. There's lots of all kinds of issues, and it's just much nicer to kind of get it off your chest. And unless it's the four major parajikas, it's, I mean, there's, all you're doing is confessing, and that's it. It's not like with the Sangha de Seses, it's a, you're on a probation, and it's more involved. But the overwhelming majority of the rules are a confession, or at least an acknowledgement that you've broken a rule. And if you're able to do that, then that's the humility and the sincerity, right? Even if you've broken a rule, even if you keep breaking a rule over and over again, if there's humility and sincerity there, at the very least, the other monks would be more willing to like help them not break the rule. Like, let's do this together. Let's not break the rule, and these kind of things, as opposed to just being exasperated by like, oh, this monk did this again, And now we're going to have to sit there for 3 hours as they deny and dissemble and complain and this and this and this and this and this. And you just have no desire to want to help this monk at all. Why am I wasting my time doing this? Why? When I could be, meditating, studying my Pali or whatever, doing many other more important, more skillful things. Are there any variation in the training rules due to impairments due to illness or disabilities? In general, no, because people with strong illness and disabilities wouldn't really be allowed to be a monk in the first place. But there are, so for instance, one of the things that is always a disqualifier for breaking a rule, like meaning that a non-offense, I should say, a non-offense, meaning like you broke the rule, however, there's no offense because of this circumstance. And that's if you're insane. Like if you go insane and you break a rule, then, there's some leniency there. Like you weren't in your right mind and you broke this rule. And so that's a non-offense. And it makes sense because you're supposed to, with the rules, it's about most of the rules, it's about intention. You are knowingly, with intention, breaking the rules. There are some rules that are, where the Buddha says it doesn't matter if you intended to or not. It doesn't even matter if you don't know the rule or not. You did this and you broke the rule. So basically the Buddha is saying you should know the rules and you should know your intentions, etc. So, and there are rules for like that you're allowed to do something if you're sick. So for instance, ride in a vehicle. Monks are not allowed to ride in vehicles. Cars, trucks, buses, trains, planes, automobiles, boats, whatever. We're not allowed to ride in vehicles. The only exemption to that is if we're sick. But otherwise, we're not allowed to ride in vehicles. With the Buddha, it is important to let go and follow the Buddha's instruction, letting go of resistance. Yes. You should question, you should investigate, you should learn and understand the nuances of why you're following a rule. You shouldn't just kind of like blindly accept it and just follow it. You should really learn why it came about and all the nuances, the intricacies, the permutations, all of that stuff. And then you understand how to follow it. And it's much easier to let go, not to resist it. Dallas remembers something I said a long time ago. And bicycles are considered undignified, right? Unfortunate. Bicycles are useful. Yes, monks riding bicycles in Theravada countries is considered undignified. In other traditions, like in Tibetan and stuff like that, Mahayana, I don't think there's the same issue. But in Theravada, yeah, monks riding. And to be honest with you, with the way robes are, robes can get caught in spokes and, and I think in many ways it would be more dangerous riding a bike with ropes than without. Rope malfunctions over time, and then you're like that meme, right, where the person's riding and they stick a thing in them and they fall over, and the idea is like, why did this happen? Because I stuck the thing in my own wheel. Yeah. I'll give it another minute to see if anything pops up, and then maybe we'll do a short meditation and then call it a night. So, Bante, do you have any recommendations for leg and knee pain while sitting cross-legged in meditation? I have had a lot of issues with that in the past and resorted to sitting in a chair. So, two distinctions. Do you have knee leg problems because of a car accident or some kind of damage? Is there like a legit medical issue going on there? If so, then yeah, probably sitting in a chair is good. No problem. If not, then probably what's needed is more yoga, more stretching, and then you'll be able to sit. And also being very mindful of your posture, observing your posture and adjusting as needed. One of the big issues with knee pain is that people meditate and their knees are like hanging, right? When you see people in lotus, their knees are on the ground, right? The knees are supposed to be supported. So if the knees are just like hanging, it might be better to put like a cushion under there, just to support the knees. So if the knees are not on the ground, then some support will probably be needed. But if you don't have like real like physical issues due to accidents and injuries and all that, then I would encourage you to stretch your body out and do hip opening exercises, yoga, all of that, so that you would be able to sit. That being said, sitting in a chair is not like means that your practice is going to be worse because you're sitting in a chair per se. What I would say is going through the process of being very mindful of your posture. Have you ever, maybe you've not heard me do a guided meditation before? Because I always do a mindful scan of the body before that. And the reason being is so that you can understand your posture, so you can minimize pain during meditation. So doing stuff like that is very important. So that's what I would say, because going through the process of developing your body to be able to sit and like on a cushion and cross-legged, there's a lot of good determination there to be learned. There's a lot of good dealing with pain and patience and better conditions for the body. There's many positive reasons to want to develop your sitting practice. And then if you need to take a break, jump in a chair, no problem. Just reading Dowse's commentary here. Yeah, Dowse, that works. Yeah. So Jay says Ajahn Punadhammo recommends hero pose for knees. I don't know if I know what hero pose is. Yeah, I don't know if I know what hero pose is. Right now, I'm doing some patient endurance because I'm sitting on the floor. I have no cushions or anything like that, and I'm practicing my Thai sitting posture, where they have the one leg back, stuff like that. Oh, hero pose is sitting on the heels. Yeah, but you know what though? That takes that you have to condition your body to do that too. That's not easy to do either. Yeah, sitting outside under a tree is a lot easier when you don't have to drag a chair with you. Yeah. Meditating outside is the best. How long did it take you to be able to sit in lotus? I can't. I can't. In my best attempts, when I was really trying to develop it, I'd be able to sit in a lotus for about a minute. But that is a full lotus is something that is easy or hard depending on the person, depending on your body, depending, I have a pretty thick body, always have. The people I see who can really get into lotus are like rail thin people. So, so I have a what you call it, a detriment there. But I have been able to actually do lotus for brief periods of time, very brief. But I don't care about lotus anymore. Like Bhante Gunaratana, the monk who ordained me, he didn't do lotus until he was in his 60s. It's like it's not something that's required. It's not. I mean, it's nice if you can do it for sure, for a variety of different reasons. Um, but if you can't, it's okay. You can still practice finding a. You got to find a posture that works best for you for comfort and stability. Even the Buddha behind me isn't sitting in lotus. Yeah, that would be a half lotus. That's a half lotus posture right there, because one is on top of the other. Only sometimes your feet get squashed and go numb. I've been doing this for 20 years and they still do that. Again, maybe that's to my body. I mean, if I set my posture up right, it almost never happens, but it's still something that I tend to deal with pretty often, especially if I don't have my full meditation set up. Like right now, how I'm sitting, just basically, right now I'm cross-legged on just a little rug that's on a cement floor. And when I do certain positions, my leg will go numb, and fairly quickly too. So for me, this is legs going numb is just something I've long since accepted, is I'm probably always going to have. and that's fine. You know, I usually try to endure that for as long as possible, but sometimes it does get to a point where it like there's like nerve pain. It turns into very tingly nerve pain, and it gets pretty rough. And then that's when I usually pretty much just okay, I'm gonna just adjust my posture. All right, Visaka, have a good night, and Isla. I find hero pose works well with a little padding between heels and buttocks. But if the padding is resting on the heels, that can cause the legs to fall asleep. So you have to be careful with that. You could do I guess what would you call it, a modified hero pose with a meditation bench. Right? A meditation bench, which is just, piece of wood and an angled piece of wood that you sit on. Um, that's another good way. I've used meditation benches in the past. So you can do that. Everybody's talking about Burmese. I use it like a modified Burmese. That's my main sitting posture. I use a modified Burmese, and I usually have a little prop over my meditation cushion to angle it up just a little bit so that it angles my back and my spine just the right way. And then I just sit very nice and comfortable. And this is something that took me, I don't know, 13 years to figure out. Lots of trial and error, lots of pain, but I did figure it out, and I'm better off for it. Those of you who know me, you know that sitting meditation is not my forte. It's always been a struggle, and it probably will be a struggle for a long time to come. My forte is walking meditation and satipatthana. That's where my practice is really powerful. But still, I still do my sitting meditation and my mindfulness of breathing. That's because that's part of the path, and we all should do it. Doesn't matter if you like it or not, or you think it's maybe not as beneficial as other things or not. It's important to do all the different types of practice that the Buddha teaches us. Hello, Rob. Yeah, late. We're gonna be ending soon. How long do I meditate daily? That heavily depends, especially as a nomad monk when my schedule is changing all the time. That heavily depends. Um, at least a couple hours a day, if I can. Um, that's the ideal, and that's walking and sitting. And but it does depend. The stability of schedule is not a consistent factor of my nomad life. So, but the other thing about my practice is because over almost 20 years now, I've developed mindfulness in all of my activities. I'm really practicing all the time. And I know that can sound like a cop out because it's like, oh, well, what do you mean? You're not really you're doing other things. And no, well, the idea, the Buddhist teachings is you sit down to meditate, and when you get up and go about your regular daily things, you're still meditating. You're still doing the practice. It doesn't end. You're doing the practice in all of your postures. So Most monasteries I've been to have 2 hours of 2 hours of group meditation a day, and there's usually not that much time to do anything else. Due to the schedules and things like that. Sometimes in the afternoon there's time, depending on if you have nothing else going on. But all right, well, I'll give it another minute or so, and then I think we'll do our sharing of merits and close out. We should read some Dhammapada, just a little bit. It's going to be one of those rare Dhammapaloozas, maybe like 1 in 20, where there is no meditation at all. It's okay. A lot of questions today, and we went through a pretty long sutta. We got a lot of stuff done, just not any meditation. All right. We are starting back from the beginning of Dhammapada. We finished up the end last time. So mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are all mind wrought. With an impure mind, if with an impure mind a person speaks or acts, suffering follows him like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox. Mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are all mind wrought. If with a pure mind a person speaks or acts, happiness follows him like he is his never departing shadow. He abused me, he struck me, he overpowered me, he robbed me. Those who harbor such thoughts do not still their hatred. He abused me, he struck me, he overpowered me, he robbed me. Those who do not harbor such thoughts still their hatred. Hatred is never appeased by hatred in this world. By non-hatred alone is hatred appeased. This is the law eternal, or a law eternal, I should say. There are those who do not realize that one day we all must die. But those who do so realize this, settle their quarrels. Just as a storm throws down a weak tree, so does Mara overpower the man who lives for the pursuit of pleasures, who is uncontrolled in his senses, immoderate in eating, indolent, and dissipated. Just as a storm cannot prevail against a rocky mountain, so Mara can never overpower the man who lives meditating on impurities, who is controlled in his senses, moderate in eating, and filled with faith and earnest effort. Whoever being depraved, devoid of self-control and truthfulness, should don the monk's yellow robe, he surely is not worthy of that robe. But whoever is purged of depravity, well established in virtues, and filled with self-control and truthfulness, he indeed is worthy of the yellow robe. Those who mistake the unessential to be essential, and the essential to be unessential, dwelling in wrong thoughts, never arrive at the essential. Those who know the essential to be essential and the unessential to be unessential, dwelling in right thoughts, do arrive at the essential. Just as rain breaks through an ill-thatched house, so passion penetrates an undeveloped mind. Just as rain does not break through a well-thatched house, so passion never penetrates a well-developed mind. The evildoer grieves here and hereafter. He grieves in both the worlds. He laments and is afflicted, recollecting his own impure deeds. The doer of good rejoices here and hereafter. He rejoices in both worlds. He rejoices and exults, recollecting his own pure deeds. The evildoer suffers here and hereafter. He suffers in both worlds. The thought, evil have I done, torments him, and he suffers even more when gone to the realms of woe. The doer of good delights here and hereafter. He delights in both worlds. The thought, good have I done, delights him, and he delights even more when gone to realms of bliss. Much though he recites the sacred texts, but acts not accordingly, a heedless man is like a cowherd who only counts the cows of others. He does not partake in the blessings of the holy life. Little though he recites the sacred text, but puts the teaching into practice, forsaking lust and hatred and delusion, with the true wisdom and emancipated mind, clinging to nothing of this or any other world, he indeed partakes in the blessings of the holy life. How long would the monks and Buddhists day meditate? It's a good question. I don't know. It also depends on what you mean by meditation. Seems like at least the morning part is about getting food, being in the villages, being around lay people, giving Dhamma talks, all that stuff. And then after the lunch is usually the time where the monks can spend the rest of the day in meditation. All right, friends. And discussion, too. Discussing with other monastics, dealing with monastic business. So, friends, if you are joining for the first time, if you're seeing this later after it's live for the first time and you'd like to learn more about myself and the organization I'm creating, you can go to the website listed on the screen, Maggasekha.org, Maggasekha.org. And this website, you can put your email on the top right and you will get an email notification every time I post about a new stream, a new video, a new retreat, a new article, whatever it may be, about my journeys, my nomad journeys, where I'm going, what I'm doing, etc. All of that can be found at the website, which is my headquarters. Everything newsworthy about myself and Maggasekha is put there. All right, let's share merit. Dukkha patta chane dukkha, bhaya patta chane bhaya, soka patta chane soka, hantu sabbe pipaniyo, eta patta chamehi, sampatang punya sampatang, sabbe deva anamodantu, sabba sampatti sittiya, akasatta chabumatta, deva naga mahiddika, punyantang anamoditva, charang rakantu sasanang. May the suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit of ours that we've thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas, nagas, and yakas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddhist dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And so we come to the end of another Dhammapalooza here at Empty Cloud, where I'll be for the next 3 or so weeks before going to California. And so all of the regularly scheduled events, my Saturday with Insight Timer, the Sunday sutta readings on the Discord, all of these, the Dhammapalooza for the next 3 weeks will be on their respective days while I'm here. So friends, Sukhihotu, may you be happy and at ease, practice well and be well, and may you have a spiritually successful and peaceful practice until we meet again. Have a good week.